10 random magic cards rated. Day number 117. That's my Shatner. Trying to get on my Billy Shatner game. Let's see what the first card of the day is. It's going to be Acidic Slime over here. Have we done this card before? It's a good Magic card. Where were you originally printed? Magic 2010. Am I right? All right, Magic 2010. Yes. Okay, nice. Acidic Slime is 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for a 2/2 Ooze Death Touch. His creature type is Death Touch. My job is Beach. So 5 mana, 2/2 Death Touch Ooze. When it ETBs, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. That's good. It's a Creeping Mold. On a body. You see, he's got a body. It might only be a 2/2 Death Touch, but that's a pretty good body. I know 2/2's not great, but Death Touch, though. So even if your opponent played like a 5 mana 12/12 on their turn, you still, you kind of match them. So Death Touch helps this card an awful lot, but back in the day especially, the real attraction here was just value. We used to have this thing called value that we factored into Magic the Gathering games. Rather than every single card being a gigantic haymaker punch that once landed to the jaw completely knocks the opponent out, rather than every 4 and 5 drop just being that, we used to have this concept of incremental value where you use your cards sparingly and very carefully to gradually produce a small advantage over your opponent. We call that value. So what this did was it took a card away from your opponent's side of the table. I know I'm over-explaining. I'm sorry. I don't know if this is comedic or not. But it took a card away from your opponent's side of the table and put a card on your side of the table. So that was important. You got a card. They got rid of a card. We call that card advantage. All right, so advanced lesson today. I don't know why I'm keeping this bit up. Acidic Slime is still pretty good, even in this day and age. So I have no idea what Ziggy wants, but he's wanted it for the last 3 videos. I keep petting him. It's not enough. I love you, buddy. I love you so much. I love you too. I know that's all you're trying to tell me. Papa, I love you. Do you like Acidic Slime, Ziggy? Simmy's your name now. Nothing. He has no opinions on Acidic Slime. He just wants to... Oh, okay, so that's something. In his language. It's like a 5.3, man. Maybe I'm just really feeling generous today, but I think, yeah, sure. Before I take it back, 5.3. What's the next card? Desiccated Naga. This is a zombie snake. It costs 3 mana. Doing a black for a 3/2 zombie Naga. It's actually, again, a snake nowadays. We don't have that creature type anymore. It costs 3 and a black. Target opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Activate this ability only if you control a Liliana Planeswalker. So I can't even do the overcosted activated ability unless I have a very specific type of Planeswalker in play. And aside from that, it's just a vanilla 3 mana 3/2. So that's bad. Card's kind of terrible. Let's 2. I'm just going to put a 2 on it, man. Lighthouse Chronologist is up next. Only ever printed in Rise of the Eldrazi, and it's mythic. This is $12.50 to buy right now. So 1 and a blue for a human wizard. It's a 1/3 when you play it, but you level it up for a single blue mana. At levels 4 to 6, it becomes a 2/4, and at any level past 7, 7 and up, at the beginning of each end step, if it's not your turn, take an extra turn after this one. And it's a 3/5. I've heard tale of this card without ever actually having read it. That's pretty funny. So how much do you actually spend? You spend 9. You spend 9 mana to get to this ability. All total for a 3/5. not the best PT, but the PT doesn't matter at all, does it? Beginning of each end step, if it's not your turn, take an extra turn. So you go, and then your opponent goes, and then you go, and then you go, and at the end of the second turn, your opponent gets a turn, and then you go, and then you go. But in Commander, you go, and then your opponent goes, and then you go, and then your opponent goes, and then you go, then your opponent goes, but it's a different opponent every time. Am I seeing this right? Is that how this card works? This card's busted. This card's... I don't care if it's like 9 mana to get to the thing. I mean, it is kind of bad. That's a lot of mana, but I can see why it's 12 something. It seems like it's just like the most aggravating thing in the world. I'm going to give this card a 6 and leave it at that because that's a lot of mana. That's so much mana, dude. Next is, I do want the audience opinion on that one. What is Lighthouse Chronologist? Is it like a 9 and I just don't realize it? Like, haven't done an Ask the Audience in a couple of days. I don't know what that was. Haven't asked the audience in a couple of days, but I think that I should for that one. Dowser of Lights is up next. This is from Guilds of Ravnica and only Guilds of Ravnica. 4 and a black, so 5 mana for a 4/5. That's the whole card. I've stopped reading because the card doesn't do anything else. So a 5 mana 4/5 is a 1.9. Sure. I would rather have some text. Ziggy, you can't be up there. You can't be up there. That's where the stuff is. You could hurt the stuff. What if you hurt the stuff? Next is Circle of Protection White. We've done all the Circle of Protections before. And all I really have to say about this is that I've never seen this art. On Cop White here, never once have I seen this art. But anyway, we don't have to do those anymore. Douthie Trapper is up next. Oh, man. Love this guy. I love this guy so much. So this is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 1/1 minion. It's a Douthie minion. Tap it and a creature gains shadow until end of turn. So that means that creature can only be blocked by creatures with shadow, and it can only block creatures with shadow. Very cool card. Originally printed in Stronghold and only ever really Stronghold. It was also printed in the list once, but man, I love shadow. Just one of my favorite like combat relevant abilities of all time. Great art, by the way, on this thing by Thomas M. Boxa. I remember it very, very well. So beautiful art on this. I love the color palette too, but kind of reminds you of the Scream a little bit, right? But either way, dude, just a great card. I love this ability. I love Tempest Block, period. Most of this video is going to be me reminiscing about Douthie Trapper. You're trapped. You're trapped in the cycle now of me just being like, oh, this card's great. But I'll stop now and just say that I'm going to give Douthie Trapper a honorary 5. It gets the honorary 5 of the day, everybody. I'm really scared of giving it anything less than an honorary 5, and I honestly kind of think it is a 5. I think a dude that you can tap to make a creature more or less unblockable on most boards is not bad. It's just not terrible at all, man. So, love him. Next is Might of Old Crosa from Time Spiral. A single green mana for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you played a spell during your main phase, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn instead. So, okay. +2/+2, so not as good as a Giant Growth, right? But if you played it before your combat step, you get a better Giant Growth. So if you don't use the best part of Giant Growth, then suddenly it's better than Giant Growth. Still, it's fine. Might of Old Crosa was actually a deck that saw some standard play back in the day. It really did. It really actually saw some play. Why is it still 56 cents from Time Spiral? That's kind of baffling, but I'm going to give Might like a 3.7, Again, saw some play back in the day. It doesn't mean that it's particularly good. Next is Grandmaster of Flowers, old CGB himself. Look at him. Doesn't it look like CGB? Anybody? It looks like CGB to me. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 3 loyalty legendary planeswalker. Its type is Bahamut. Amazing. Anyway, as long as Grandmaster of Flowers has 7 or more loyalty counters, it's a 7/7 dragon god creature with flying and indestructible. +1 Grandmaster. Target creature without first strike, double strike, or vigilance cannot attack or block until your next turn. You can also +1 the Grandmaster to search your library and or graveyard for a card named Monk of the Open Hand. Reveal it, put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle it up. So Monk of the Open Hand, in case you wanted to know, is a single mana for a 1/1 elf monk. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, it gets a +1/+1 counter. I always thought this guy was kind of cool, like a little bit cool, and to be honest, I kind of remember him seeing more play in Standard than Grandmaster, but I still think Grandmaster's awesome. Wow, $1.27, $1.88. These are good. Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, 44 cents, I believe, is the lowest price for this thing. So, wow. Planeswalker Championship promo looks awesome, by the way, this one. But in any case, I like this guy. I don't think he's a bad Planeswalker at all. both of his pluses, he only has pluses, but like both of his pluses are pretty good. You know, I wish that the +1 to get a creature just put the monk into play. I think that'd be much better, but still, I think this guy's fine, but, you know, I still have to give him like a 4.5, you know? I still have to do that. He's no Gideon. You know, he's a white planeswalker that turns into a creature later in the game or whatever, but again, I think that we would just take more or less any version of Gideon that turns into a creature over a guy like this, because it takes so long to turn him into a creature, so... I'm not super convinced, but I do like the cut of his hair. That I really do. At this point, he actually does have a nice haircut. I rarely mean that, but anyway, Broodstar's up next. Oh, Broodstar. Okay, can I tell a story? So Broodstar is a 10 mana, 8 and 2 blue for a star beast with affinity for artifacts and flying. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts that you control. So theoretically, if you have 8 artifacts in play, not only can you play him for just 2 blue mana, but he's an 8/8 flyer. Pretty good rate, right? 2 mana. So when I first returned to competitive Magic after my, like, you know, I'm playing Yawgmoth's Bargain combo days, it was a couple of years later, and Mirrodin was out. And there was a deck. Hot deck on the block. You may have heard of it. It's called Affinity. So I hung out a lot, competitive Magic-wise, with my cousin William and his, you know, at the time, girlfriend, would-be ex-wife, eventually, Christine. And they both were very good at Magic. As a matter of fact, Christine is studied under the right word. She had spent a lot of time on the competitive scene with one or the other of the Ruel brothers. And that's pretty impressive to get some lessons from that guy. And when I say spend some time, I mean like every now and again they would hang out and he would like teach her this or that line or whatever. So, and my cousin William, by the way, was no slouch. He was always very good at competitive Magic. He took it very seriously. And one day we go to the card shop for a Sunday, and there's a group of other guys there that are for the Sunday tournament, right? And we're playing Affinity. Me, William, Christine, we're all playing Affinity. These 3 other guys, as I would come to later know, Sonny, Andy, we always called him Wits, but anyway, Sonny, Andy, and Jesse, they're all also playing Affinity, but they are playing Broodstar Affinity. I did not know what that was. I didn't understand. And William and Christine showed me a copy of Broodstar, and they're playing this card in their deck as like the main guy in their deck. And I was like, oh, that looks really good. And William and Christine were both like, scoff. That card is bad and slow and bad and dumb. And I was like, okay, geez, all right. Long story short, I can't even remember how that event went. I mean, it's like a Sunday Magic at a random card shop. I can't really remember how it shook out. But I went from knowing those guys as like, those guys play Broodstar is bad, therefore those guys aren't great at competitive Magic, was like, again, my cousin and his wife's take, to a few years later, I walk into a card shop on Forest Hill Road in Macon, Georgia, with a bunch of pizzas because I was working for Domino's at the time. So I walk in with a bunch of pizzas and I'm like, holy crap, there's a card store here. And who do I see but Sonny and Andy and Jesse, the Broodstar players. And because I met them again at that card shop, I ended up actually hanging out with them fairly regularly, especially, Sonny and Andy would be at my house all the time, reteaching me to play competitive Magic. These are the people who I played Lorwyn Standard with. I'll sometimes talk about how the standard that I played the most in competitively was Lorwyn, where I actually went to Pro Tour qualifiers and stuff like that. And it was because of Sonny, Andy, Jesse, Joel, another friend of ours. But yeah, just that's every time I see a Broodstar, I think of like, meeting them the first time and like meeting them the second time and how they became like very good friends of mine that are at my house like 5 days a week. So yeah, Broodstar has a special place in my heart in some ways. And for the record, Broodstar's a pretty good card. Maybe not back in competitive Standard where Affinity is like the baseline deck and it kills you on turn 3 and you don't play Broodstar until turn 3. So maybe don't play the one that plays Broodstar, right? Play the one that kills faster. I agree with that sentiment, but when you look at a card like this, just in a vacuum, it's obviously pretty good. And in certain commander decks, it could be just great. So I'm going to give this a 5.3, and I'm never looking back, baby. Next is Rogue's Passage, which we have done before here on this series, but pretty good card. Rogue's Passage is all right. Next is Omniscience. Oh boy, it's Omniscience. This is $10 from Foundations, but that is a pre-order price, so I wouldn't trust it. But still like the lowest price you can get it at. That's interesting. But still, this is 10 mana. This is 10 of your hard-earned mana, 7 and 3 blue for an enchantment. You may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. That's interesting. Wow, what does that let you do? Everything. It lets you do just about everything. But what do you give this? You know, it's the classic Magic player's conundrum, the classic gambit, right? How much should a card that says you win the game cost? And it's something they used to literally ask their designers, from my understanding back in the day. If you could design a card that just said you win the game, how much would it cost? And 10 appears to be the answer to that question, but you have to actually have spells in your hand, and those spells have to actually win the game. But that's not too hard, because some of the spells in your hand will draw cards, thus putting more cards in your hand. And some of those cards will draw cards. And you see where I'm going with this? If you can chain card draw and you just play every spell in your deck and win the game, probably. If you play every spell in your deck and don't win the game, then like, what happened, man? Still, Omniscience, I feel like I have to give like a 7.2 to, because there's so many ways of cheating it out. And once it's in play, it is arguably, and I think we could have a pretty spirited debate about this, right? I'm not like married to this position, but it is arguably the best text box in the history of Magic, right? Just ignore this rule. Ignore having to have mana. It sounds pretty good to me, right? We'll move on to cancel. 4. No, don't do that, Tov. Cancel is a 3.5. Cancel is, in fact, a 3.5. I think it's a perfect 3.5. The more I think about it, sure. This is just 3 mana to counter target spell at instant speed. Because why would it be a sorcery? That'd be a cruel trick, a cruel joke, a cruel troke, as I actually said the first time. We'll move on to Ralzerich from Dragon's Maze. This guy is a 4 mana planeswalker, 2 a blue and a red, for a 4 loyalty man. You can +1 into tap a permanent and then untap another target permanent. -2 Ral to have him deal 3 damage to a creature or a player. And then -7 Ral to flip a bunch of coins, 5 to be exact. Take an extra turn after this one for each coin that comes up heads. This card was played either in a big pro tour or at Worlds, because like the flips mattered. I remember the flips mattering greatly in a game of Magic that was on camera and was for an important price. Anyway, Ral's good, dude. Ral's pretty good. He's what you want out of a planeswalker in a lot of ways, right? He's got removal. He can use his removal mode twice, theoretically. That's pretty good. It does damage to the dome if you want him to. I kind of like that. It's not bad. He does untap shenanigans. Cool, you know? And then the coin flip mode seems pretty bad, and I usually don't like flipping coins, but when we're talking about extra turns, you know, I'm into that. Especially since it's usually going to be either 2 or 3 extra turns. And it sure feels like 2.5 extra turns probably wins you the game. Very likely. So I'm going to go with, am I going to do that? Yeah, 5.4. 5.4. Especially considering it is playable in Commander. I think this card is more than playable in Commander. Well, a lot of Planeswalkers are, but you know, if you have any sort of doubling season effect and you can throw this down and immediately flip the coins, then like, yes, that's ridiculous. So let's go. Oxona up next from Theros Beyond Death. This dude should have seen play in Standard, never did. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a 4/2 Ox. When Oxona enters the battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. This also has Escape, 2 red, exile 8 other cards from your graveyard. Escape means that you can cast it from your graveyard for its escape cost. It also escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. So if you pay the 2 red and exile 8 cards from your yard, you have paid 2 mana for a 5/3 draw 3. Why didn't this really see that much play? I shouldn't say it didn't see play in Standard. It did see very sparing play in the top tiers of the Standard it was in, but not very often over its life cycle. I think the most likely place to see this card was in a Covert Go Blue deck on YouTube, because I'm fairly certain he played this card like 4 times that I can count. Over the space of like 6 months. So this was a popular card with certain content creators. He wasn't the only one, because I exist too. But at the time, I think there was also like Sonio and Mono Black Magic put out some decks with this card. So he was popular with us, but he wasn't necessarily played by people who know what they're doing all the time. So, no offense to any of my fellow content creators. A few of them are much, much better at Magic than I am, but the pros they didn't play too much of this, which is kind of sad because the card is pretty good, man. If you're talking about a 2-mana 5-power guy that draws 3 when he comes into play, you can sign me up anywhere, and it's not too hard to get 8 cards from your yard. You can mill this into your yard along with a bunch of other stuff and just play it for 2 mana, which is how I remember it being played most of the time. I miss this card, dude. Oxabagonus is so good. 5.2. I do not care. 5.2. This card's great. I will advocate for you for the rest of my life. I love you. I don't know why I'm like hypnotized by the Ox for some reason, but this card never got its due. It's so good. Heartbeat of Spring. That's a good Magic card. Originally printed in Champions of Kamigawa. 3 mana, 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of that type to his or her mana pool. So it's a mana flare, but it's green. That's it. It's literally mana flare because it also benefits your opponent. Normally that would kind of suck, because you play Heartbeat on curve, and then your opponent gets the mana production before you do, which is not something you want, but that's not how it's going to happen, okay? You're gonna play Heartbeat on like turn 5 or 6, along with a bunch of other mana untapped, right? And just you get to do the thing first. So you can also Heartbeat of Spring off of like a Mana Rock and a Llanowar Elves or something, and then like you've got all your lands untapped. So it was just better. It was a better effect in green than it ever was in red, and a lot of Mana Flare decks back in the day would be green-red anyway, because of Llanowar Elves and Soul Ring and stuff like that. So Heartbeat still has a place in Magic, not only history, but like in Commander today. I think this card is playable. So the price reflects it a little bit too. But what's the Secret Lair one look like? Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Oh, I like that. It's only like $350. It's sick. Anyway, but let's I'm gonna put a, that's tough. 5.9 on Heartbeat. I think 5.9 is about right. It's symmetrical, and that's not always what you're looking for, but it is a strong card. And I think it might deserve 6 territory, but I'll stop just short of it. Dirtwater Wraith is up next from Mirage. I remember this art, but not what it actually does. 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 1/3 Wraith with Swamp Walk. Pay a black, and it gets +1/+0 till end of turn. Black used to be able to pump its creatures. There was a time when black had pumped the fire-breathing effects. That's why this thing costs 4 mana, which is just too much. It's too much. But if you are against, if you're in the mono black mirror or whatever, this probably breaks it, I would imagine, especially considering back in the day, a lot of black removal could not kill black creatures, like Dark Banishing, Terror, and stuff like that couldn't kill black creatures. So, say goodbye. That seems pretty good, but it's not. It's not good. So I'm going to throw like a 3.5. No, because cancel's like a 3.5. I'm going to put a 3.1 on this. I think we'll do that. Boy, that's enough cards. Oh, actually I can do one more if I want to, but I don't, because we told that whole story about Broodstar, and now the video is 25 minutes long. How did I let that happen? I'm not sure. I hope you enjoyed it. We all have stories with cards, and half of the fun of Magic is sharing those stories and those experiences, and I really kind of went all out doing that in this video. Hope you don't mind. I'll see you guys tomorrow. That's Monday. Bye.